And Tim, go ahead and give the intro.
Well, excellent. Thanks, Jeff. I'm glad that everybody could be with us today to talk about this important topic of trying to create a continuous improvement culture. So we're going to talk about 12 ways of starting to build a continuous improvement culture in your organization. So a little bit about my background is I'm from manufacturing. I practice lean implementation and techniques at a fiber optic manufacturer in the northeast of the U.S. Most of you probably know me from online through my blog, A Lean Journey, where I write quite a lot about this topic today. So I'm kind of encouraged to talk a little bit about some of the ideas that Jeff and I have talked about in the past. So Jeff, why don't you tell them a little bit about your background?
I'm Jeff Hajek. I have the Gotta Go Lean blog, and that's actually how Tim and I met. We had this online collaboration that we started a while back about, helping each other promote and kind of giving feedback and commenting on each other's sites. And it's kind of developed this relationship, and we realized that we have a lot of stuff in common. So if you look at our posts, a lot of what we do, we share a lot of the same common values, and that's really what led to this monthly event that we do now, where we just get together, we just chat for 45 minutes or so about some topics that are interesting to us. And again, it's gottagolean.com, and it's my actual company is Valaction Continuous Improvement. I worked for Genie a while back, and then Danaher in their Fluke organization, and got a lot of my lean background there. And then when I launched out on my own, I started trying to put together all the tools that I thought was missing over the years. And that's what I generally do on my site is I offer a lot of lean and continuous improvement tools that you can download. But with that said, let's go ahead and talk specifically about the ways we can start building a continuous improvement culture. Just a side note, the timing on something like this when we go through 12, we're not going to talk about each of these items in the same level of detail. But at the end, we have a couple of options for you if you want to go into more detail next month. A lot of these have so much meat on them that we'll be able to just touch a single one. If there's something that you want to get more information on, we can do that. And again, we'll give some contact information at the end, so you can contact either Tim or myself if you have any further questions. So with that, let's go ahead and move on.
So I think what's important here is to frame the word culture, and as we start to talk about the ways to improve that, is to get some sort of baseline on how we define culture. So I think culture in this case can be defined as the day-to-day activities and experiences of the ordinary person or worker within the company.
Let me jump in. I think I gave you control for the screen, so you should be able to advance it yourself.
Yeah, there we
go. There, okay.
The next thing is that many people, I think, believe that being a successful company or creating successful results is what creates the culture of the business or a lean culture, and it's really it's not the culture that necessarily brings the results, but it's the performance and the way in which you run your business that helps drive the culture of your business.
Well, that's all that psychological stuff too. That's all that positive reinforcement. As you get successful doing something, it makes you want to do more of it. So, I mean, it makes sense that it happens, but it's really this escalating cycle, isn't it? You get better performance, you continue doing that cultural things, which drives better performance, which adds to that culture. But like you said, I think the first thing is once you figure out how to get some of these things in place, it's almost like a brute force push, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think once you set that framework, it certainly makes you go forward, and it's something that doesn't happen overnight. It's not a short-term, result, but certainly, when we talk about going true north, this is one of those things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I just get fascinated by all the psychology behind almost everything you do in lean. Just the way you make changes and change management and how people address problems. All this stuff is it's just such fascinating material when you dive down into the underlying layers of it.
No, I agree. It's certainly something that we're going to talk a little bit more about in the coming slides here. But to follow up on or continue the discussion on the lean culture, I'd like to say that this is characterized by two learning elements, and I think that's much about Lean is learning, and so for me, it really comes down to two elements, being humility and respect. And when we talk about humility, I think it's one of those things that the more you think you know about Lean, the more you find out there's more to learn. There's always other opportunities to learn, and I think Jeff and I both share that passion for continuing to learn and trying to share that with other people.
Well, when you're working in a company and you have other roles, Lean becomes like a smaller portion of your day-to-day life. But then, Tim and I are both in Lean roles. When I'm talking about like managers, a manager who's in a Lean company. Lean is a portion of life. But when you get into this whole immersion in Lean, like Tim and I do now, I feel like I know less about Lean now after just being focused on it completely for like the last 3 or 4 years. I learn so much more about what I don't know, and I'm actually like he puts in here humility. I'm a lot more humble about my knowledge. When I was working for companies, people referred to me as a Lean expert. And I think like now that I know more, I know all these things that I don't know, and I feel less like an expert now than I did back then, even though I know more nowadays.
No, I know exactly how you feel about it. So I kind of get the same exact approach. I think there's a lot to learn, and I think that's why you're always on this journey and you never stop. But I think what's also fundamental to that Lean culture is the people and respect for people. Those are really the two cornerstones for creating this culture.
Okay, let's.
So one of the first things that we're going to break into in the next 12 steps, the first step is to try to create many small wins rather than the occasional big win. And so you might say to yourself, well, why is that important? And really what you're getting down to is trying to create the ability to have regular, uninterrupted activity throughout everybody in the organization at all levels. You're trying to create habits, break old ways of doing things and create new ways of doing things. And I think, also with the smaller wins, you run into opportunities where you're able to keep up the enthusiasm. You get these big projects, they're big and clunky, and maybe harder to solve, and you don't necessarily see the reward and benefit of those activities like you do on the small incremental improvements.
And it's not just the enthusiasm they have to keep up; it's just the knowledge itself. If you don't do a Pareto chart for 6 months, you forget how to do the clickology on Excel, and if you forget how to do the Kanban calculations, all this stuff is it's your education on Lean has a half-life, and you start forgetting things if you don't use it regularly. So that's why I'm a big fan of this. When Tim put this one up here, the way we set this up is Tim and I were decided to take turns on the 12 things. And, he put one up and I put one up, and as we developed it, we kind of hashed it out about who would talk about what, because a lot of our stuff overlaps. Like we said earlier, we have a lot of the same ideas. But, this one really sticks with me because I tend to forget things pretty easily if I don't have it written down or if I don't do it routinely. So, I really like this one.
Yeah, the other thing is big projects are more risky. They require a lot more resources, which you generally don't have. They're big, time sink, and certainly I think, while you may get a lot of benefit initially from those kind of things, they're very hard to maintain because you don't have a lot of big wins to get in an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when you start your journey you do, but certainly you want to create that culture of everybody every day and the continuous improvement. It's a thinking process. And I think on those big projects you don't necessarily have that approach.
Yep. Well, and the next thing, though, that leads into is this, little improvement every day. What you run into is if you don't have it planned, if you don't actually structure your day to get that information out, or that improvement done, you just don't do it. And those small gains are hard to do if you don't have the time on your calendar. And I put this up here that improvement doesn't happen by accident. And you're not going to luck into Lean or into Lean success or anything like that. It takes a lot of work and a lot of focus. So put it on the calendar, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get it done. And if you put it in the calendar, you have to have the resources all ready for it. You can't just schedule the time, there's a little bit of work that goes into making sure that the team has all the information and the list of tasks and the tools and materials and everything they need. Now, I looked through some of the people that are attending today, and it's a pretty wide range. We have a senior process engineer, we have some directors of operational excellence, and people like, at all levels of the organization are here today. So when I talk about this, I'm trying to talk to the general population, but leaders have to make sure, one of their big jobs is to make sure that there's enough materials and everything available, so when they ask people to do improvement, they can actually be successful at it. And that's a tough thing sometimes for people to get their work done if they don't have the right tools and structure and authority and all that in place. And then finally, what I like to tell people is when you put time into improvement, it's an investment. People invest for retirement, companies invest, but we think of the improvement time sometimes as just time that you're spending. And unlike other stuff that you do in your daily work, if you spend time on production, you get stuff that one time. But if you're investing your time in improvements, it's going to make all your future production time more effective. So that's why I like to think of it like that. But
I think that most organizations are kind of resource limited. I haven't really heard of a company that says, well, we got excess people and time and money. So you certainly have to be careful with how you use those. But I think, when you come to something like this and trying to create a long-term culture, is you have to think long-term. And so while you may take some time today, you're really trying to free up opportunities in the future. So 10 minutes, an hour here or there today is going to save you hours and weeks, months, years from now. I think that mindset's important to have when you think about planning for that improvement.
And then one of the things on that too is a lot of the time that you have on the calendar, you may not actually use it during that time slot. So if you put it on the calendar and then an assembly line goes down, what you can always do is you can always jump a project forward. As long as you're prepared for it and the team knows what they're doing, there's nothing saying that if you have a scheduled hour next week and something goes down today, you can't work on a project early. So the idea is always have something ready to go, and then you can just assign it off to people. But just with that in mind, I'd like to ask a question now. And I'm just curious if people actually have let me see if I can get this going properly. Okay, there it should be on. So I'm hoping you're seeing the poll on the screen right now. But go ahead and just answer this and let me know, do you actually have time built into your schedules for improvement? And if you do, how is it scheduled? So we have about half our votes in now.
I think an important point to note too is, like you said, about having the events ready to go or activities ready to go, because you will come up against downtime, especially if you work in any sort of service or manufacturing-related business. You got peaks and valleys, and so if that activity is ready, you can pull it in when the timing is right.
Let's go ahead and close this poll out and share the results. So what we're looking at here is most people just do the production work. About half the people just do production work. But there's a lot of unplanned improvements that people do get on there. But it's very clear that most people don't look at this 10% number as part of the way they operate. And that is something that's really critical to a culture, is to actually give people the resources, because you're not going to create the culture of improvement if you don't actually commit the time to doing improvement.
And I think this activity goes well with the first one. I think the smaller and smaller the activity is, the less big chunks of time you have to free up to work on it. So I think this is important to combine those two.
Okay. I'm going to try and move us along because, Tim and I, when we were discussing this, we said with 12 things and half an hour to cover them, we're going to run into time problems. So we both like to talk a lot, and we're both really get passionate about this. So I'm going to try and move us along better.
So I think this goes without saying. I mean, we're all human. We make mistakes. I mean, that's going to happen. And I think it's the attitude towards these failure that's really the important part of creating a lean culture. So, is your management style or approach to punish, or do you treat all sort of failures as opportunities for improvement? And I think, obviously, in the lean perspective, with respect for people and humility, we're obviously going to err on the side of creating a learning opportunity out of this. So, this is you can share best practices. You can certainly have lessons learned. There's a lot of different approaches you can take to trying to learn from your mistakes. But certainly the key point here is to really make failure okay in your organization.
Oh, I think you covered it, huh? Okay, I actually just got a question in from Charles, and he asked how many people are in the poll. We had 12 people answer the last poll. One of the things that Tim and I have been doing poorly over the last 3 or 4 months is we get these things on the calendar fairly late, and that means we don't have as many people in these as we like. But we do put them on YouTube, and we start getting a lot of information, a lot of people looking at them after the fact. So it's a pretty small sample size, but I think when you have that big of a, when you have nobody saying that they put that kind of time into their calendar, it's a good indicator that if you expanded the sample, you'd probably still be along the same lines. So I think the message is probably the same on the poll that we would take even with a larger sample, is that people generally don't structure their improvement time on their calendars. Okay, this one's a pretty easy one to talk about, and this is the whole philosophy of the seed corn. If you're a farmer, you got to save some of your corn to plant for the next year. If you eat everything, you're not going to have anything left over. And I think what happens a lot of time is, people will make an improvement and they'll pull the resources out of that team. And what it does is it leaves the team in the same situation, because a lot of what happens in lean is this crisis management mode, where a team gets behind. Excuse me one second. Just had to clear my throat, and I didn't think anybody wanted me doing that in the microphone. But as you do lean, a lot of what happens is there's a team that'll have a problem, and you'll be falling behind regularly. You'll throw some lean resources, some team members at it, give them the resources to fix the problem, and what they get back to is they get back to this normal operating state. And they still don't have any spare capacity. I say spare when I'm really thinking programmed capacity for improvement. And what you find is that they're always going to be in the spot of playing catch-up. A good lean organization will have a little bit of excess capacity, even though it seems wasteful on the front end. What it does is it makes the teams get better and better and better, and eventually, the more you invest in improvement, the long-term gains are much higher. And I think we live in such a short-term society, especially with the stock market, that's hard to hang on to anything that looks like excess. So
I would equate this to not being perfect. We want to strive for perfection, but we don't necessarily always get there. And I think I like to follow the 80-20 rule. If you get 80% of the way solved through the problem, I think you move forward. You're always coming back in this continuous improvement activity. So it's okay that you don't get 100% completed. I think you got to take each opportunity and look at how you can make the most of it, and then move on to the next one.
Absolutely. Let's get to the next slide here. I'm a Cubs fan, so I pulled some of these pictures together for Tim, and I had to throw in the Cubs. And
yeah, of course, I figured you'd rub that on my face.
But of course, as a Cubs fan, Tim's from the Boston area, so the Patriots and the Bears rivalry and stuff like that. Whenever they play, I was pretty humiliated earlier. But to find an actual Cubs championship team, I had to go back, and this is the 1906 team here, and I couldn't quite find any more recent championship pictures.
No, and you won't. So I think with that, it's we love the heroes in the U.S. Mentality. So we like to reward firefighters and that kind of mentality. But I think what we really want to try to do is look at prevention and problem solving and creating a teamwork environment of solving problems. Because obviously, the sum of the individual contributors is much greater than the individuals. So. But with that said, I think it's important to note that not all groups are teams. So teams need to be mentored and developed, and certainly there's a lot more information on team dynamics and groups. There's entire volumes of literature online that you can find about that. But certainly the emphasis has to be on creating a group approach to solving problems.
Whenever I hear the comments about firefighters, I always jump in with this. When you really think about what a firefighter does, the majority of their time is not actually spent fighting fires. It's mostly prevention. They go out and do their inspections, and they look for safety violations, and they do education, and they're constantly at little fairs and, teaching kids. So all this, to talk about firefighters, the real heroism they have is really in this keeping people safe in advance. And, we look at on the shop floor, we look at the person who can come up and solve a problem when it happens with much more adulation than we would somebody who, they spent months ahead of time really meticulously preventing the problem. We never see that. We never reward that activity in the same way we do the person who can, pull out all the stops and get things done at the end of the day. But, kind of unreal.
Teams also, create this kind of shared learning, which allows you to create more standards in your organization.
Yep. Okay, here we go. So the bedrock of any lean organization is this really structured system. All the different systems you put in place on how you do things so you get the most effective use of your resources available. And it's like pouring a foundation on a building. If you get that good foundation in place, you can build much more on top of it. When I'm talking about the systems, I'm talking about the 5S system. How do you label floors, and how do you color code product lines, and all the stuff that that spreads across the whole organization. And documentation, how do you log your administrative processes and record them, and then where do you keep them, and how do you find them easily, and how do you update them? Operations review, it's the monthly look at your metrics, and Tim will talk about measurements in just a few minutes. How do you manage your day-to-day operations? And all this stuff is stuff that's left to chance for a lot of people. They don't always have a card they bring to their stand-up meeting in the morning, and they don't go down the checklist of did I get every point I needed to make. They go out there and if they do a stand-up meeting, it might just be an ad hoc meeting where they kind of bounce around. But the more structure you have in your systems, the more resources you can serve, and the more you can focus on the getting actual gains and improvements with your continuous improvement. And anything to add on that one, Tim? I'm just going to move it along and get us back on track here a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's well put. I mean, it's the cornerstone of creating a lean business. But I think what's equally important to once you have these standards is to kind of look at the performance. So certainly what we measure gets improved, and I think one of the keys to that obviously is aligning that to your business objectives. So lots of times you see businesses that with measures that don't seem to help them get to where they want to go. So certainly that alignment, I think, is key throughout the entire organization, from the people providing the product or service to those at the top management level. And again, you want that to drive change in behavior. So if you just report something as a status update, that doesn't necessarily benefit you. So you want to look at how you can change behaviors. So for instance, do you look at your on-time shipment as a number in which you massage as the promise date, or do you look at what is actually your delivery date to the customer? So you'll find these kind of modifications of performance measures because we think it makes us feel better, but really you want to drive the change in behavior.
Well, and let me ask this question. I put a poll up together for this question for Tim, and just curious about how much people actually do have metrics in their organization. And I'm not talking about the big picture, top level profit, inventory turns type of things. I'm talking about the frontline metrics where people that are doing their production work can actually change their behaviors based on these metrics. So I'm curious who's got metrics in place. And with that said, I'm going to ask Tim another question to answer while the poll's going on. How do you keep people from getting overwhelmed by the number of metrics? Like, do you have a recommendation on how many is a good size? What's a good size dashboard for a team? Like, what's that tipping point where you get too focused on numbers and metrics and lose sight of we get kind of lost in the weeds? That was a kind of weird question.
Great question, because I've gotten this discussion one time related to metrics, and that really measuring any performance, it could be viewed as some sort of waste. So I think, obviously, like any process, we would want the minimum set possible to characterize the business. And so, typical approach, like Jeff's saying, is some sort of a bowler type of metric display. It gives you kind of a status of where you're at for the year. and then a month-to-date snapshot. So for us, usually it's about an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and I think, you got to look at a couple metrics in your organization, because not one metric is characteristic, but certainly you got to have something service-related, quality-related, safety-related, and then some sort of productivity measure. And of course, ultimately, we hope that drives profitability.
Well, just what's a specific measure you might use? Just something so people can get a feel of what we're talking about.
Well, inventory turns is a great measure, kind of the cash flow. So you're looking at how well you're utilizing your business processes. So you're creating, systems to manage your inventory coming in and out, and controlling WIP and not overproducing, and you're making the right products. So inventory turns is a good measure of how well you're practicing lean, at least on the material flow and information flow side.
Okay. So here's the results of the last one. It's about an even split on each of those questions. Is that, but I guess the telling point is that out of the 14 or so people who answered this one now, we have 2/3 of the people say they either don't have them or they're not effective at helping teams change behaviors. So that's the key, is to really look at what are the drivers. And I did an article on small business recently, and as I try to do a lot of things myself, I get spread pretty thin. And I step back every once in a while and I think of, if I was a consultant coming in to help me with my business, what would I do differently? And one of the things is to really identify the drivers for, how do I increase my sales? And when I say, like, for my business, it's the number of visitors to my site, the effectiveness of my marketing, and then the number of products that I offer to sell, lean training products online. So I have to look at myself in terms of what are the the specific things I can do to improve each of those different things, and I have some metrics in place. How many my hitting my product release dates, and just little things like that, where I track my own business. So I put my money where my mouth is, and I say, if I'm going to go help somebody else try to do lean in their organization, I should certainly be doing it in my organization, my company. So you really got to look at those things that can change, that you can act on. And I think that Tim was talking about a lot with inventory turns. You can see if the inventory turns creep up, you can take actions against that metric. And that's the big thing, is good behaviors. So let me go ahead and put
I think along those same lines, so you get measuring performance and you're trying to drive behavior. So I think the next thing to look at is what do you do to reward success? Yep,
and here's the way to think about rewards is there's a couple different categories, and you have the financial and the non-financial, and then just the public recognition. And maybe it's not even just public recognition; it's any type of recognition. A boss coming by giving you a pat on the back, that's a big deal for some people, and it's not very costly for the managers. It just takes a lot of effort to stay focused on it. And Tim's going to talk about going to Gemba in a minute, and he's going to, that's where the information comes from managers. Now, just a few things on here is one is, you can do a lot of non-financial rewards, and I think a free lunch is really more like a non-financial, even though there's cost involved. It's a quick, easy thing that you can just give somebody as a manager and reward them for specific things that they're doing related to lean continuous improvement. The financial side, there's a debate that's growing right now about whether financial rewards actually work or not, whether they increase or decrease performance. And my personal view on it is that financial rewards only work if somebody can change their skill level to help that. You can't pay somebody to be more effective. What you can do is you can give them bonuses if they choose to do the right behaviors that lead to long-term success. So, I look at this when you think about things like tips for servers at restaurants. They learn over time what's effective to get higher tips, and then they change their behaviors and they adjust to get higher tips. Salespeople, when they do commissions, you can't just pay somebody to be a more effective salesman, but if somebody sees that they can increase their commissions by gaining more skills, they may go out and take some seminars, or they may go and find a mentor, or they may change their actual behaviors and how they identify leads and things like that. So for me, the financial side works when it's done long term. When you look at the no magical improvements, you got to do something to get better. And here's that go to Gemba.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot that you can do non-financial, and it doesn't take necessarily a lot of effort to recognize somebody for doing the right behavior.
Yep. And I'll throw one more thing in there. Like I love to talk about lean, but the recognition isn't just to the person receiving the reward. If
Right.
somebody sees somebody else getting recognized for it, and if they value that, they see the behavior that's rewarded. They see what the manager is looking for, and they see what the company is focusing on, and it helps them change their behaviors too. So a reward is really for the whole team, even if only one person is receiving it at a time. And there's a whole bunch of stuff we could dive into. So I'm going to stop talking right now and let Tim go on this next slide.
So I don't think we could do a presentation without talking about going to the Gemba. So I think that's one of the cornerstones of lean Toyota production system. So of course, this is obviously where the work is done, and this allows you to get the entire team involved in problem solving. And of course, this is where you're going to actually find out the real situation. We talk about using real data, real events, and not hearsay. And so this is where you're going to find, if you go to the actual place, the actual condition, you're going to find what is really occurring and be able to fix that. And I think that follows along with some of the other things you talked about with respect for people and the continuous improvement and constantly learning experiences.
I actually go farther than just say go to Gemba. I tell managers, move your desk down to Gemba. Especially administrative processes, it's a little bit easier. When you're on a shop floor, it might be a challenge to get a desk in an area where you can see the whole operation. But when you're closer, stuff isn't as hidden and insulated from a manager. And when you think about a manager's day-to-day operation, the majority of time is not spent when you need, for many managers, is not spent when you need silence or you need, on the phone or anything like that. You can put a pair of earplugs in and do a spreadsheet at your desk just as easy on the shop floor where you can see what's going on around you as you can in an office. So I tell people, get their desk down where they can actually work. And you can always go back into a conference room or something if you need to make a private phone call. So next one is, this is going on in the NFL right now, is there's a whole bunch of people who want a piece of that NFL pie, right? There's what do they say? It's $9 billion in revenue, and they're trying to figure out how do they share that revenue with all the different people involved. When you think about your company, it's the same thing. Whenever you make an improvement, all that money goes somewhere. Anything you save goes somewhere. And often there's this feeling of all those gains are for the company. So you got to be able to figure out how are you going to share the wealth if you want people to be really committed to making improvements. And, I have a long list of people here. So if you're talking to your vendors about making changes that will make your job easier, the vendors aren't going to want to do it unless there's something in it for them too. So if you're going to save money in your company, some of that has to trickle back up to the vendors and help them be more profitable too if they're going to do a lot of difference, in how they do business. And, there's a whole bunch of people that participate in this. But the best thing to do, always the best thing to do is grow the pie. When you have a limited, when you're trying to share a pie, if everybody can get more, people tend to be happier. And that's one of the great things about lean is it grows the pie for everybody. So even if your size, your slice doesn't change the percentage, if the pie gets bigger, you get more out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a key point is lean works best when you're trying to grow the business. Otherwise, it's just a cost reduction effort. So I think that's a key subtle point that you make there. Much about what we do in lean is about thinking about the way we do business and changing that thinking, following along the lean principles.
Tim, let me stop. Let me stop you here for 1 second. I have a couple questions that I've been paying attention to the slides and haven't watched any questions. One says, Gemba does not lead to, let me make sure I get the whole thing here. It says, Gemba does not lead to the trivialization of the problem, especially in shop floor, and limits the autonomy of the group. So I think, maybe I'm not understanding it well. Tim, do you get that? The Gemba does not lead to the trivialization of the problem, especially in shop floor, and limits the autonomy of the group.
That's not been my experience.
I think I'm probably misinterpreting how the question is. I think, just going to Gemba isn't going to solve the problem. What it does is it gives you a better insight into the problem, and you're also closer to where the problems occur. I think what happens with people is they start doing a problem, they start doing work over and over and over. Okay, because.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Oh, no. Okay, I see what he's saying. He just put a little bit of extra in there. The question is, if a manager is down there all the time in Gemba, does it kill the autonomy of the team? So it's something I really hadn't addressed before. I don't think so. If you're a manager who's strong, I actually moved my desk when I was managing teams. I would move my desk down to the shop floor, or I did a order entry team, and I moved my desk right where I was near them. And after a short time, I just become a fixture. And if you practice what you preach, and you don't go in there and give people close direction, you basically ask them questions. Well, how do you think you should handle this? And you can use that Socratic approach where you let people solve their own problems. Once you're down there for a while, people become numb towards that Hawthorne effect. Another question I have here is from Scott, and it says, what does Gemba stand for? Gemba is actually a Japanese term, and it means the actual place. Tim, what's your feeling on using Japanese terms instead of, why do we say Gemba instead of going down to the shop floor to the work area?
Well, I mean, much of the learning obviously came from Toyota, which is the Japanese, organization. So you're going to have all these Japanese terms, and just trying to relate those to what we do here in the United States. But I think it's up to each organization. If they think it helps them, to use those terms, good. If it doesn't, and they want to adopt their own terms, I'm okay with that. I think at some point you got to have those terms in the knowledge, otherwise you lose the translation.
Yeah, I think the ones that are commonly, Kanban is a common one. Kanban is a common one, and Kaizen is another one that's pretty well used. Gemba. Yeah. You get to the second level ones of like Jidoka and Haijunka. Jidoka is a machine intelligence basically, and Haijunka is level loading. And those are a little bit less commonly used, but widely used enough that people understand them. There's no benefit in saying level loading versus Haijunka unless it's what your organization uses as a whole. So.
Right.
I got a comment from JD here, and it says, the advantage of using the Japanese terms is that there is usually not a preconceived understanding of what the word means. And that's a really good point. So when you're teaching a new team, if you give them like a blank slate to work off of, you can mold the understanding. And I'm a big one for having that, a glossary that you use as a common understanding within your company. I like to pitch my own things in here once in a while, so I do have an online dictionary that you can use or create your own. But get something that you can give to people and let them understand what you're talking about. Starting to get a lot of questions here, and I prefer to do the questions sometimes to the slides because I make sure that we're hitting the targets. So here's a question. As a supervisor, my team is the skilled workers who are responsible for producing parts. Time is very limited to get together as a team because we need them to produce parts. With that being said, we have started many small improvement projects, but I find it very hard to follow through because my day is dictated by the floor. I am responsible for running an entire shift. How do I follow through? That's the million-dollar question, and it's literally a million-dollar question. If you can get that time, in some cases on an administrative side, sometimes it's a little bit easier because you have a little bit more flexibility when you're not having 10 people all linked together. When you have an assembly line or a very, a tightly set up flow, anybody out of the system, it disrupts the flow and you run into problems. I think, you may have to consider things like, doing an upfront investment of bringing in a few temp workers to be able to pull some of your team off and actually do the work. If you, think about how you'd handle it if you were strapped for time and you had a person on vacation and somebody came in sick, what would you do? And sometimes you handle that. I'm assuming in those situations, and this is from Jerry. Think about how you handle it in the problems when you have to, and use some of the similar methods that you do. The key point, though, and one of the things that Tim and I are talking about in this whole presentation is when you lay the foundation and build up a continuous improvement culture, these kind of problems start to trickle away. When you get to the point where you have that extra 10% capacity, when you do run into the problem of somebody being a little short-staffed or having a project you need to put a little extra effort on, it gets much easier to do, and it's all that investment stuff. So we're running real short on time here. This might be a good question for for one of those follow-on. I'll do a little poll in a minute about what people want to hear next. But
yeah, I just want to add quickly to that.
Yeah, please.
You have to take some short-term risk or short-term, loss in order to create long-term gains too. I mean, it's not difficult, or it is difficult to do those things, but I think if you book, it's a capacity situation. If you book yourself 100% and you say your job requirement is continuous improvement as well as manufacturing or service, then obviously we're not allowing that time to occur. So I think that's the key point that we said in one of the early slides was you have to build into your plan 10% time to make improvements.
Yeah,
the other part of this, I think we could go into a little bit more detail, but I think we want to be developing people as well, because if we're trying to change the thinking and the approach that we take, certainly the way in which we're going to do that is to develop more lean thinkers, more lean people. We want to encourage the continuous improvement. We want to foster all learning opportunities and teachings. We certainly want to build in this approach of problem solving and countermeasures.
So Tim, was that your quick way of getting me back on track for diverging?
You got that right.
Okay. Yeah, I think you covered this one pretty good. You want me to move on?
Yeah, I think it's just the respect for people and development. Certainly this is the lever that you can use to change the speed in which you're going to make the improvements. So the more knowledge you get, the more you can develop people, the faster you can go.
This is one of the interesting things about people is people are the only asset you have that actually becomes more valuable over time.
Yep.
And everything else wears out, but the longer you have a person and the more information you give them and the better trained they are, they actually improve their performance over time. It's really a unique type of asset. And some people are offended by calling people assets, but I think that's really what they are. They're a part of the team that you expend energy to get something out of people, and that's you got to think of people as how are you going to have that long-term commitment to getting things done over a period of time. And if you don't develop your people and invest in your people, you're never going to advance as a company. So that's where the focus on education comes from. And
this appropriate slide being number 12, I think this is one of the key points, certainly that made Toyota successful for the long term. Is this long-term thinking?
Yeah, all these things here as we're talking through these, commit to long haul is really a combination of all these other things that we talked about. Tim talked about developing people, and that's that education. Tim also talked about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge slide with making mistakes okay. And if you punish people for making mistakes, they're not going to commit to with vigor to the long-term changes. The small changes every day, another one at Tim's slide. I must have just copied all of Tim's slides for this one. And finally, everyone participates. But, you look at this road, and this road goes out across the horizon. And, the hard thing for lean for many people is that there's no end to it. There's no, okay, we're done improving, because everybody else out there competing with you is also making gains and making changes. So if you ever think that you're done making improvements, somebody's going to pass you up. So when I talk about the long haul, it's not just the long haul; it's the permanent haul. You're always driving. You're never done. You never reach a destination with lean. But that's just the nature of it. Is you got to always be getting better.
So I think you kind of see that in a lot of the discussions out there in talk, and certainly today we kind of presented 12 steps or that you can start your lean transformation. But by no means is this a complete list. I think this is just our best effort at 12 things that we think you should start immediately to consider in your organization.
Okay. And I'm doing something a little different. This is a little surprise for Tim. So Tim, you can feel free to answer this one also. And I'm assuming that we're going to continue doing this next month. It's a pretty fun morning for me to come in and do this. I get to just have a conversation with a similarly minded lean thinker. So if any of these things appeal to you, let us know if you want us to dive into more detail, or if you'd rather we talked about something else, let us know. So just with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start talking a little bit about the follow-up stuff, and we'll go to that slide a little bit with the communication information. But if you haven't subscribed to Tim's blog, I would really So, I have my list of lean thinkers. I use the iGoogle, and Tim's right up near the top of my, I put him just below Sports Illustrated where I can track how the Bears did. But I see what he's doing every day, and he's one of the few bloggers that's got a permanent job that blogs regularly. A lot of other people will blog regularly, but they're the people who are doing that as a business. But Tim does this on the side, so you got to figure if a guy's that committed to lean, he's worth reading. So, yeah. So if you want to follow on him, I recommend doing that. And of course, I recommend following my blog. Mine's a little different. I don't just do the articles. I'll often give out lean terms and just a bunch of other things. Sometimes I do videos. So mine's a little bit more eclectic in both the schedule and in what you get from it. But it's just a little bit different sites, and that's why I think we work well together. It's a little bit complementary. So let me close this. Let's see what people decided they want to have. So, okay. So the improvement time was a good one, and creating a strong improvement team. So those will be two that Tim and I will keep in mind for how to schedule time and how to build a good team. And that's almost probably, those two might be a combined one. And Tim and I will get back to you on this. We'll post it up on our sites about what we decide to do for next month. And we'll try and get up earlier so we can, let you have a little bit more information. A couple final comments. One that says, thanks for putting this together. And another person asked, missed the beginning of the webinar, will there be a link to a recorded session? The best way to get the sessions, the recorded sessions, is to either subscribe to Tim's or my blog. I think most of you probably got here because you are subscribed to something. But if you go to those, as soon as we get it posted up on YouTube, we'll let you know. And Tim's been posting the actual slides themselves. So if you want to take these slides and use them in your organization, feel free to do that. So I think Tim will be getting those posted, and I'll do the video.
Yep, absolutely. Again, you want to start this learning process. So certainly visiting my site and Jeff's site, there's a lot of complementary materials on there. But certainly, if you want to get information on definitions and training programs, certainly visit the villaction.com, and you'll have all those resources available to you.
Sorry about that. I had this up on my screen, but I was still sharing the slide, the poll results. So here's the actual specific URLs and stuff. A lean journey and Gotta Go Lean are the two ways to get there. And like I said, I can't recommend Tim highly enough. His articles. He's been doing a lot of book reviews lately, so take a look at that. And he does this Friday quote. Plus, he's got Facebook. I'm pitching Tim. I should be pitching myself here, but he's also does this lean tip of the day on his Facebook page, and I think there's always this like friendly competition between different bloggers, and it's always fun to see how you're doing compared to other people. But the one point where I feel completely outclassed by Tim is on his ability to get the Facebook fans, and he does a daily. It's a daily lean tip, right, Tim?
Yeah, it's daily. Yeah.
And it's just a quick one, maybe 15 words or 20 words, but it's just, hey, do this today, and it's a good read. And if you don't want to subscribe to Facebook, he does that every once in a while. He'll put out a compilation of his lean tips. So.
Well, I appreciate all the kind words, but you probably should have talked a little bit about your training program, because I think there is a lot of good resources out there to get you started, and certainly I think we do have a lot of complementary work together. But you can't miss with the a complete lean glossary of all the terms and how you're going to use that. And a lot of the information is downloadable, so you can save that and kind of create your own versions of things for your own business.
Okay. So I think with that, what was the last thing? Oh, last slide is just a copyright thing. So, or I'm sorry, there's some information here. The best thing to do is go to our site, so we both have the information on there. And then just the copyright stuff. When you get these slides, again, we like people to be able to use it within their own organization. We prefer people get it from our sites. Just with part of the reward for doing this is we do get more traffic off of it. So yeah, so just feel free to use it once you get it downloaded. Sometimes it takes us a little while. Tim's a little quicker than I am at getting that up. There's a little bit more to do it in the editing side to get the video presentable. Final ones, where can I find the copy of the slides? Tim will get them posted, and then we'll have the links on our websites. Free and short. You guys are great. Free and short webinars are awesome. What you can learn about lean from your car. Took me to the next level at work. Thanks. Also, a repeat visitor, so that was nice. And I've started reading this. You guys are great. I thought maybe Tim had put that in, but it wasn't him. It's someone else. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up with this. It seems like we're getting closed down on the questions. So only 6 minutes long today, Tim. We'll have to fix that next time, or maybe just schedule a few extra minutes.
Yeah, I think a few extra minutes. That's a long topic. A lot of questions today. I think that was good.
Okay. Yeah, that was unusual.
Everybody's time. Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for coming.